So about a week or two ago, I made a video talking about how Lando Norris and McLaren are throwing away the Drivers' Championship and to an extent the Constructors' Championships, as they could very much easily be the top dog right now going into the summer break if they weren't being such idiots with the strategies, mistakes, just everything. And I explicitly left out Oscar Piastri for most of this video because I knew I was going to be making a video separately about he is a fantastic driver, but he is showing this season how inexperienced he is, making quite a few mistakes, such as going wide in Barcelona and Austria's qualifying, losing him the chances of really fighting up there, his race pace really struggling in Canada and Imola, and being in quite a few tangles this season, especially with Carlos Sainz throughout the season. But then something happened.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much. Thanks for the coordination. Well done. Maximum points. Really good weekend.
So like I mentioned, his start to the 2024 season was nothing to write home about. He started in Bahrain getting a P8. It was the worst of the top 4 teams, but nowhere near getting near Alonso, who in that Aston Martin. 18-second gap, P8, not as good as anyone else. Behind both Ferraris, both Red Bulls, his teammate and both Mercedes. Not a good way to start the season. Then in Jeddah, he got stuck behind Hamilton for half the race and could only manage 4th and 4th position in a race where there was one Ferrari out of contention and Hamilton and Norris had issues with their strategy. It was as good as he was gonna get, but again, still no podium for him considering how well McLaren and he did at the end of the last season. Then in Australia, again, he came P4, which again sounds pretty decent. However, both Red Bulls had a stinker, with Verstappen's car giving up on him and Perez just doing Perez things. And then in Japan and China, he came P8 respectively in both of those races. Again, not bad, but like we've seen most of the season so far, behind both Ferraris, behind his teammate, behind both Mercedes, and behind both Red Bulls. But then going into Miami, McLaren brought upgrades.
We did it!
So this is the part of the season where his performances were doing a little bit better. However, it was only because of how good the car was, and he was very much behind Norris's shadow. This is where Norris won his first race Grand Prix. Norris was putting the fight to Verstappen, and I didn't feel it was going to happen, but a lot of people were pushing the Norris and Verstappen consensus that they were going to be having a Drivers' Championship battle. With Norris picking up multiple podiums, multiple P2s behind Verstappen, where a lot of the times he could have won as well, and Piastri wasn't really getting any results there. Like I said, he was making mistakes in qualifying that would affect his results. In Austria, he got quite lucky because Norris and Verstappen tangled, but again, it wasn't the greatest of races for him. He should have been ahead of Russell, and that should have been his first Grand Prix win. Quite understandably, people were putting into contention his actual ability as an F1 driver. Now, not as in he has no ability, but as in he's got raw ability and he still needs a season or two to get up to scratch and then be fighting with Norris and beating him. So the consensus was Oscar Piastri needed a bit more time. I guess that meant one race weekend. Great Britain is really where Piastri jumped back into this F1 season, with coming again P4. Sounds terrible again considering McLaren's upgrades. They were much better than Ferrari now. They were better than Mercedes. Mercedes was still giving them issues though. However, when you look deep into what happened at Silverstone, Piastri could have very easily won that race. McLaren screwed up his strategy, leaving him on the wrong tyre when the conditions were changing. That lost him a whole pit stop, 20 seconds by not double stacking. And when he finished 12 seconds behind the race winner, Lewis Hamilton, it does show that he would have won by 8 seconds. Now, obviously, there's different things that could have happened, overtaking, defending, but 8 seconds on actual statistic timings, the proof's in the pudding. He had a great Silverstone race weekend, and it wouldn't stop there. Hungary was monumental for Oscar Piastri and McLaren itself. It was the first 1-2 front row lockout for McLaren since 2012, and it was McLaren's first 1-2 finish in a race since 2021, with Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris finishing 1-2 as well. So it was a brilliant weekend for McLaren. And of course, Oscar Piastri went and won that race. Now, of course, again, we had some issues with the strategies performed by McLaren. I don't know why they didn't pit Piastri first, so Norris came out in front of him, so there had to be team orders to let Piastri by. But in that first stint, Piastri was on it like a car bonnet. He was the best driver on the grid there. Second stint was a little bit worse, but considering he thought that Norris was going to give the position back, it's fully understandable where Norris could have been pushing more than Piastri was. And if they did revert back, you could have seen Piastri pushing more than Norris and still winning fair and square. But Oscar Piastri won that race, and that really cemented him as a driver in F1. Of course, he's now in the history books as an F1 winner, but also he had a real massive boost of confidence. Silverstone and Hungary, both 2 great races in a row, arguably being one of, if not the best driver of both those races. He was very clearly on it. And going into Spa, he did not slow down. Again, this track was not as good for McLaren. He only qualified P6, but again, he managed to get up to P2 in the race. 6/10 off the race win. If he had 1 or 2 more laps, he would have overtaken potentially Hamilton, potentially Russell. He was rapid. Again, he had to overtake Leclerc, Perez, and his teammate Norris to get into that P2 situation. And considering only a few races ago, people were talking about Oscar Piastri's race pace compared to his qualifying pace, what a turnover of form. So going into the summer break, Oscar Piastri in the first 7 races of the championship scored 53 points overall. Not terrible, not great, considering McLaren weren't the second fastest car for most of it. Okay, but in the last 7 races we've had, he has scored a whopping 114 points overall. The third most of any driver on the grid right now, only 2 points behind the championship leader Max Verstappen in that brilliant Red Bull, and 1 point behind Lewis Hamilton in that Mercedes, who has won 2 of the last 3 race Grand Prix. Not a bad shout for only your second season in F1, and to be dominating Lando Norris in the last 7 races by a whopping 16 points overall. He's really putting the fight to his teammate, and that is what is so great about this whole situation. Oscar Piastri now sits on 167 points this championship season, with Lando Norris on 199. That is only a 23 point gap, and considering it's a lot bigger of Barcelona, the turnover in form is just brilliant, and I really do think if McLaren keep up this form, Piastri could potentially catch up to Lando Norris by the end of the season. And I'm telling you, if Oscar Piastri beats Lando Norris in this championship season, or even comes within 20 points to Lando Norris, I really do think a McLaren civil war could be happening in 2025 if they get that car right straight away from the start of the season. And my God, I would love to watch that. That would be absolutely fantastic. Oscar Piastri winning a championship before Lando Norris. A lot of people saw it coming, but oh my God, that would be juicy. And then, all in all, bar the racing, we have to talk about how much of a likeable character Oscar Piastri is just in general as well. Because F1 not only is about the racing, but it's all about the off-track situations you put yourself in. You have to be good with the publicity, as this helps the team bring in merchandise sales, it brings more fans into the sport, it brings more fans buying your merchandise as a driver, and it brings sponsorships to yourself and the team as well. So it's a massive part of F1, and he is nailing this so perfectly. In 1.5 seasons, he's become a fan favourite. Considering I've been watching Norris and loving him for ages, I'm almost on par with loving Piastri and Norris now, with just how amazing Piastri is with his publicity. He very much reminds a lot of people of an ex-F1 driver.
That dominant car pushed Lewis Hamilton all the fucking way.
That's the hardest thing to do. It's not going to be easy.
No.
It's more like a hobby for me, so obviously I don't need to do it if I don't want.
And he's already had such iconic F1 moments. We've had his whole Alpine contract where he completely destroyed them with his tweet about not joining Alpine and about how he never wanted to join them, and then going and joining with McLaren. And then people clowned on his judgment to move there when McLaren were dreadful at the start of the last season. But then look at where they are now. He's scored almost double the points Alpine have altogether since he's joined F1. We've had him giving the cameras such iconic looks, especially in Austria when that guy in the jetpack fell over. We've had all of his team radios where he just seems so composed about everything, which is so rare these days with F1 drivers, because you do see Max Verstappen and Lando Norris mostly just complaining all the time. You even had it earlier with Lewis Hamilton, always complaining about his tyres back in the day, even though then he'd go do another 20-30 laps on them. So it's just really funny seeing such a different personality in F1, and I think that's why it resonates with everyone so much. So all in all, Oscar Piastri this season has just been fantastic. I think the turnover in form is the most impressive thing, of course. 53 points to 114 points difference is just immense, and he really is now helping McLaren as a constructor, because yes, he was sort of letting the side down, him and Norris, but Piastri a lot at the start of the season, really not helping in that fight between them and Red Bull. But now he really is, and with Perez staying at Red Bull, it looks like McLaren have that Constructors' Championship wrapped up. But what do you guys all think about Oscar Piastri and his form in 2024? Does he have world champion potential? Can he surpass Norris in points this season? We'll have to wait and find out. But all I know is he is one of the most refreshing drivers to have entered F1 in a long time. He's a fan favourite. I'm really excited to see what he can do for the next part of the season after the summer break, and I can't wait to find out.